Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michel Botman, and welcome to this new session of OTF Connect titled Using Math Moment to Multiply Math Skills. And today's episode is called Make Math Moment Through Measurement. And this is part one of a series of two. And this episode is actually number 9 in our series of 10. So we
Lots of
only have,
numbers.
yeah,
I was gonna
lots
say
of
it's a
number. We
series
only
within
have
a
one
series.
to go. And but as I just said to Naomi, no worries. We know that this series has been extremely well received. Lots of positive feedback. It's been very successful. So next week is the last one, but we're going to work straight away at planning something else for the future, for the near future. So we're going to have more math sessions coming next season. So don't worry about that. So let me first start with a quick acknowledgement that OTF is asking us to do. We acknowledge that we are gathered in the territories of various indigenous people, and we further recognize their stewardship of these lands in which we live, learn, work, and play. And of course, we are delighted to have all of you with us, already 26 people in the class, and I'm expecting that we're going to be around 40 or 50 people by the time everybody has joined. We are, of course, extremely happy, as always, to have Kyle Pearce and John Orr with us. As I mentioned last week, I'm not going to insult them by reading their bio because you guys know them very well. Most of you are repeat participants. So I'm just going to quickly go over their blogs because, as I always mention, it's the best way to discover what they have to offer. So Kyle has two blogs. One is called tapintoteensmind.com, and the second one is called mathisvisual.com. And John as well has two really fantastic blogs that I invite you to discover. One is called MrOrisageek.com, and the other is called mathbeforebed.com. And I must say that for me personally, working with Kyle and John is always a pleasure because they are such professional. They make my life easy, So I'll let them do their magic
Awesome.
again, like they usually do. So go ahead, guys,
Uh,
and thrill us again with another session. Thanks so much.
Again, thanks, Michelle. It's always, as I say this, I'm sure every week, just like you say that every week, is that we thanks so much for the introduction. We are always excited to do our Thursday afternoon sessions. It's something I think that we've come to look forward to because it's always been such a great group, great discussions, and lots of participation from you folks. So just to kick things off, we're gonna get rolling right into it. As always, we got a couple things to share right off the bat to get us going, but also right off the bat, what we always do is ask you to get in the chat. Let us know who you are. Let us know where you're from. Also, the thing that we've been doing, I think, for like half of these episodes now is asking you, let us know how many sessions you've attended. This is 9 out of 10, as Michelle just said. So are you here with us with all 9 so far? That would be awesome if you were. Look at Gabby is saying 8. So welcome back, Gabby. But maybe this is your first. If this is your first, let us know that too. Because that would be awesome to know going into this session. Looks like Michelle.
9 for 9.
Yes,
Lots of
Michelle.
9
I've
for
recognized
9s.
you every single time. 9 for 9 for sure. So Kyle, let's get rolling. We're talking about measurement here and I'm loving measurement. And actually, this is perfect for me. And I don't know, Kyle, if you want to get into some quick wins today before we get going, but
yeah, definitely quick wins.
Yeah.
You start today, John.
Yeah.
You start. First of all, you got a huge delivery that you had to help carry in. So that feels like a quick win. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
We got a new ottoman. So it
okay,
showed
there
up.
you go.
It's only been 11 months waiting for it to show up because COVID decides to slow everything down and shipping and all that kind of stuff. So it's been a long time coming. Anyway, on a side point is kind of like my big win actually kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about today with measurement. And only because my next kind of topic tomorrow is going to be diving into measurement, like measurement of weird shapes, measurement of composite figures or combination figures. And we're going to do some volume as well too tomorrow. And I teach grade 12. So we're doing that in our grade 12 class. And that's kind of connected to my big win. Like this is our first week back in class face-to-face. And for me, and I don't know if you folks, I know we got a lot of pre-service teachers here, but if you are in the classroom, some of some of the Toronto area is still online remotely. However, say everyone outside of that area is back this week face to face. So that's my big win is that it was really nice to come back to face to face, and mostly because my class you could see it all week on their faces that it was they wanted to be back. They were excited to be back. They work so well. I've got such a great group this week in my grade 12 class. It's an MAP 4C class for those of you who know the course codes. And that group is dynamite. They're just super eager to do math every day and make it a welcoming experience. If you've had a class like that, how much of a pleasure it is to come to class when everyone is just, has that right mindset. They have the mindset of like, I want to learn, but I also want to learn why. And I want to learn, I want to explore learning for learning's sake instead of a just get done kind of atmosphere. Because I've had classes and students like that, they just want to get done and move on. But this group is definitely, I love to learn why things are working. We just finished some trigonometry. So that was some great stuff. Kyle, what's your quick win this week or today?
Yeah, you know what, like you, I mean, the interesting part we're going to explore today as we get into this session about measurement, we're actually going to talk a little bit about how the reasoning we use with measurement, how that develops, and we are going to engage in a task as we usually do. But before we get there, today I was doing kind of like a different type of measurement. I tried out a brand new task in a classroom. I got to be in a grade 7 class, hanging out with a teacher, as I mentioned earlier, and had a blast with this one here. This one is a part of a unit that we'll be releasing very shortly. And you might not be able to tell yet, but this particular flooding the ice rink task involves students first estimating the fraction of the ice rink that was flooded to this point, and then also trying to determine like how long this would actually take. So I got a chance to do this in a classroom today. It was fantastic. We had lots of great thinking, lots of great estimates. And then obviously as I revealed more information for students, they got to sort of explain to me how they went about solving this particular problem, because we ultimately let them know eventually that, in the second session, he filled up his cooler with water. He comes back out and he then floods this blue section of ice. He goes kind of horizontally this time, and it's 3/5 of that remaining 5/5 of the ice surface. So it's a multiplying fractions problem. And we had a fantastic time, students consolidating, and had a blast.
Awesome.
So yeah, great for me, especially. I don't get to be in the classroom all day like those who are in the classroom, like John and many in the group. I'm in meetings, and then I get to get into a classroom here and there. And I try to get into one a day if I possibly can. So it's great. I had a blast, and I'm now super excited to continue with some of our big ideas from our 10-part series. We're in 9 of 10, as Michel said, and we're in 1 of 2 for measurement. And we're really gonna continue trying to leverage this idea of curiosity to intrigue our students, to really draw them into the conversation, and ensure that like every student can access the mathematics through this conversation. So that's one thing we're gonna continue on with. And John, what else are we after today?
In particular this week, like you just mentioned, we're talking about measurement, but like every episode we've had in the series is that we want to explore these topics conceptually so that we can not only push, our own knowledge, but we're in a better position to push our students' knowledge. So we better can understand things conceptually, then we'll be able to help our students in such a deeper way. Kyle, what is the other thing that we always want to stress here as we get going, as it's one of the big focuses for the whole series?
Yeah, and I would argue probably like the biggest goal, I think probably the most important goal that we all do as educators is helping students to develop a productive disposition towards mathematics. Again, when they leave my class at the end of the year, it's great if a student's like, wow, math is awesome. It's my favorite subject of all. That's always great. It's a bonus. But in reality, the thing I want for every student at minimum is for them to walk out and to understand, to have this positive, productive disposition towards mathematics, like why it's important and why it's helpful, like how it can empower us as humans to go into society and not be afraid of it, right? Like we don't want that fear. So we're either repairing this relationship or we're strengthening this relationship. And I'm hoping those in the group with us, especially all these returning friends, that you're feeling that like strength in your own productive disposition towards the mathematics. So we're going to continue that exploration today through our 3-part framework. And we're going to get right into it here.
Let's do it.
We're going to start, John, with a little bit of a warm up. And I'm going to ask the group here, John, double check the chat. Are people
I'm watching
here?
the chat.
Are people here?
Wait,
like, is everybody with
There's
us?
some chatter happening about kind of like where they're from, but I don't know. Give us a yes. You're with us. Like, I'm here. I'm ready. Give it to us in there. Give it. Yeah, here we go.
There we go. Now we're starting.
Here they come. I was worried that we were like, oh, so zoomed out.
Here's the question I want. And I want it to be like instinctually, like the first thing that comes to mind. I'm going to ask you, you're only going to have 2 choices here. And I want you to answer in the chat as quickly as you can, meaning like just reflex, like not thinking deeply about this, like just a reflex sort of answer. What first comes to mind when I show you the following 2 visuals? And I'm going to ask you essentially to say left or right. And the question, the prompt is, which is bigger? Okay, which is bigger, the stuff on the left or the stuff on the right? Is everybody clear? Can I get a couple of yeses on that? Are we clear? 1-word answer in the chat.
Yeah,
left,
they're all ready. They are
or
ready.
Right. Here we go.
Left or right.
On the count of 3, which is bigger? 3, 2, 1, go. What do you think? We should see some stuff coming in.
Yeah, I'm seeing lots. I'm actually seeing some good splits here. I'm seeing some lefts. I had a couple rights right away and lefts, and then I got a same from Gabby. Marcus isn't sure. We got an L, which is a left. We got another same from Chris. Colton, which is, we know Rebecca to be
welcome back.
Welcome back, Colton/Rebecca. Colton/Rebecca says R for right, and Sarah's saying no cheating, same wasn't an option.
I love it.
She's like, the teacher said left or right, people, come on, stick with the plan.
I love it. We've got a lot of awesome responses coming back, which is awesome. Now I'm wondering though, like the next part here, John, I don't know, I'm gonna throw it in your court here. Like, is anybody right, or could we all be right? Could we all be wrong? Like, what's going on here?
I'd like to hear from the group. Like, I'm wondering
what's happening.
I'm wondering if we have some brave folks. We want to hear from some brave folks. Like I wonder if anyone wants to turn their mic on.
Like if somebody wants to share, that'd be awesome.
It's saying I'm leaning this way, but it's possible that this is the right answer, but also this could be the right answer because of this reason. So that'd be interesting to hear something like that. I heard a voice. It was like getting ready. It's probably Marcus.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to jump in here. I was wondering if the circles on the right-hand side had a bigger surface area. I don't know if that's like an optical illusion, but then if the circles were slightly bigger on the right, I don't know if that would kind of make it a little more complex.
I love the thinking there. So like this idea that like maybe like surface area, maybe they're more like it's covering more surface area. Awesome. Any other perspectives out there? Flip the mic on. Don't even worry about raising that hand.
Hi, it's Naomi. I initially thought on the right, but then I realized in terms of the optical illusion, they might be more spread out. Like to me, they look more spread out, which is why I initially thought there was more on that side. But then I was like, then I realized, and then I thought on the left, it looks like they're just more in like order. Right?
Interesting.
More in order.
Yes, I like that. That array on the left is like keeping like some organizational, sort of like order
and it can be
intact.
deceiving. Like to me, the right one was a little bit more deceiving because it's more spread out. So like immediately I was like, oh, there's more there. But then I was like, oh, they're more spread out. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's more there just because they're more spread out.
Right.
Totally.
There's an interesting one from Lindsay she's like more area covered overall. Border of dots are farther out. I don't know if Lindsay wants to turn her mic on and kind of like elaborate on that just a little bit,
Yeah, I'd be super
or
curious.
maybe
Sure,
or
yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't think the area by the dots is covered more because I think those circles are all the same. So the blue section is probably all covered the same, but if you had to draw a border around the dots on the right, the entire area of that would be bigger.
So if I draw a border around this thing, now forgive my border there, folks, versus the border around the edges here, that's what you're saying? You're saying, oh, I got to go up here. Oh, see that? Oh,
so the one
right
on
there,
the right,
this area's got more area versus this area over here. I got you. Okay, awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Semantics. Like when you said larger, to me that meant not necessarily more, but bigger, which goes back to that area thing again.
Bigger. Okay.
It was kind of vague. It didn't say more quantity or a larger number or more dots. It just said you just said larger. So to me,
interesting.
Gotcha.
Interesting. So I'm really liking that perspective. Like we're getting lots and lots of different kind of ideas that are being shared, which, is essentially what I'm kind of after. Like I intentionally made this ambiguous because there were so many different approaches. There were so many different attributes, we'll call them, that you could have used to actually measure this quantity. When I say which is bigger, which what? Like, are we talking about like how many dots? Because if it's like how many dots, well, if I count them all up, I'm going to notice the one on the left has more dots. Or if we go to that surface area idea, it's like, well, let's take them and compare. Look at, I don't know if you could see that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think you gotta peek. You gotta see there's a slight difference.
It's like slightly.
What a
like
trickster you are, Kyle.
I know. It's so like mean. Or, I could even modify, I didn't, but like, if I wanted to, we could compare them side by side and like, we could compare like the saturation of the color. Like if it was more dramatic like this, I could say, well, on the right, it's more blue, right? So there's a bigger saturation of blue. Like there's so many different things that you can do here with this. And actually, you could take this and make it a which one doesn't belong if you want, right? And you can have all these arguments. So everyone in the room is correct. And to kind of further this point about when we're trying to measure, like I want to drive home this idea that like we have to be pretty specific on what it is we're measuring. Like, I don't know about you, like if I look at this image, and I compare to that image, I don't know if you ever saw this on the news. It was a long time ago now, but the one on the left was Barack Obama's inauguration, and the one on the right was Donald Trump's. And somehow Trump said his had more people. I don't know. But anyway, it really is up for debate for you to look at and determine like, what are we actually measuring here? So I want to take us down a little path here, John, if that's okay with you and the group. I want to throw up here a which is bigger. And actually, I'm just going to cruise through this because I want to get to an activity and I don't want to run out of time tonight. But, we could compare these two and we could say like, which is bigger? And again, we could have a debate over that, I'm sure, right? Like, which is bigger? Like, which one has more area? Which one has a longer length? Which one is more blue? I could maybe compare these and I could say, which is bigger? I don't know about you, friends, but I'm going to guess most people are going to say, well, there's more Oreos on the left than on the right. I think you'd all agree. But if I had said, no, what I meant was like, which has more filling, you would have been wrong, right? Because actually, if I stack all the filling on the left, it's not as much as stacking the 3 fillings on the right? Which is bigger over here, right? Are we talking about the thickness of the line or the length of the line? Like there's all kinds of different things that we can do to compare here. And that's kind of where I wanted to begin. So I want to give you an opportunity, and we won't share with our mic yet. I'm going to give everybody like a little bit of time. This was actually an activity that a Ministry of Education officer, Anne Pigeon, she's back in the classroom, I believe now, from Thames Valley. And she had done this, and I thought it was really intriguing, the conversation that arose. So my question to you is, if I throw this pail on the screen, what attributes or which attributes might we measure here? And I'm going to ask you in the chat to feel free to just kind of fire in as they come to you, almost like a notice and wonder, like what are the different attributes we can measure with this particular pail? And if you have any that you'd like to share verbally, feel free. We'll have you flip on your mic and you can share as well. All right. So we'll give you a little bit of time here to think on that and begin the sharing.
Get in the chat there and share there. There's lots coming in. So have a look and do a little scrolling, because you've already scrolled through a whole screen worth of notices and wonders or attributes that we could measure.
Love it. I love it. So we'll give just a little bit of time here. And is anybody willing to share verbally, John, or do you want to start sharing some from the chat? What are you thinking?
I can share from the chat if unless somebody wants to turn their mic on, but it's probably quick enough that we share. I can just share. So right now we got a lot of, say, volumes and circumference came out a few times. I'm seeing lengths and widths and heights all over the place. Dell says mass. Teresa says weight. And we have length. And we got Michelle's like diameter. You could look at length of the handle is pretty specific. Is there any liquid, like maybe the weight of the liquid versus the weight of the bucket? We've got the circumference of the top compared to the circumference on the bottom. I think I've covered most of what we, surface area with paint from Savvy. Oh, what else we got here? Surface area there again. Lots of volumes. There we go. I think we've captured them. I've captured them all, Kyle.
Yeah, so many good ones that came out. I'm feeling like the only one that I didn't hear was like the value, like the cost. Or
yeah, I didn't see that one yet.
But there's probably many others as well. And this isn't intended to be like an exhaustive list, but just to kind of get our heads wrapped around the importance of what it is we're measuring. And I don't know, I used to say this all the time in math class, and I don't know if I fully understood how important it was, but I just knew we were supposed to, like, put units with the number at the end of a problem, right? Like, and that was stressed when I was in school, and I stressed it. But like more so now than ever, I realize it's like we have to be so clear, like crystal clear on what it is that we want to measure. And then with this process, like after we decide what we're going to measure, we need to then select a unit that has the same attribute. Like, so if you pause and think about that for a second, you're like, I don't know about you. Like maybe you're like nodding with me, or maybe you're like, well, duh, of course you have to pick a unit that has the same attribute. Like I can't measure how tall John is in pounds or in kilograms. Like those have they're measuring, or the unit has a different attribute than height. So it's like, that doesn't make any sense. And it's like, I feel like I intuitively always knew that, but I never explicitly understood that. I never knew that I knew that, if that makes sense. So this is really important for students. Like for us as the educator, we have to be thinking and helping students to first be able to like articulate the attribute, but then also articulate like what would be some units that have the same attribute, right? And John, you're going to probably bump into this tomorrow when you dive into your measurement.
It's definitely something that you talk about. Like I'm just reminded of it on the fly here when Kyle, in grade 9, we did the sticky note problem, and there's a video of me putting sticky notes across a board, and when I do that with my 9th grade students, I definitely do a notice and wonder when they see that video. I don't know if we want to bring that up while I just talk about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, you bringing it up, or you bring? Okay, you're bringing.
I'll grab it. You keep talking.
Yeah, so it just give you a visual about. But the point I wanted to bring up here is what Kyle's trying to make here about knowing what you're measuring. And it was an interesting conversation with some students, because when I say, what do you notice? What do you wonder? They say, okay, you're putting sticky notes up. How many sticky notes eventually kind of come out? And then we asked that next question what do you want to know more about? Like, if we were going to figure out how many sticky notes cover this board, what would you like to know? And so some students already start problem solving, right? That's what you want to listen. You want to listen to those problem solving ideas come out when you ask them what they want to know more about, or what would you like to have more of, so that you could figure out how many sticky notes cover this board. And when that comes out, many students will say, like, you can hear strategies like they want the area, right? So it's like, how much, like, give us the area, Mr. Orr. And it's almost like, well, I'd love to, but I just don't have this like area calculator, or I don't have this stick that measures area, like I can't give you the area right here. Like, what else would you like to know? And then it forces them to go, okay, what am I measuring? What are the units that help me measure that thing? It talks about, okay, what I will need to know this dimension versus this dimension. That's something we can actually measure. It's hard to really measure area with a ruler, right? Like kids want to know, give me the area. Well, I don't really have this area measuring tool for you. But that's an interesting thing related to what you're saying here, Kyle, but like, we gotta need to figure out what is the process of measuring. We want to select a unit that we can use to measure an attribute.
Well, and we get to dive into, and it's great. Like, you're kind of helping us segue into this exploration of like the process of how you can reason through measuring, because you and I, John, being high school math teachers, and myself being in more of a K-12 role now, but in the high school math class, I tended to jump to pretty abstract forms of measuring, like you said, like grabbing a ruler and, measuring and then using some sort of formula to create this thing called area. And a lot of students aren't there. Like, even secondary, like high school math students aren't there yet. They haven't built this fluency and flexibility with it. And then, like, once you've selected this unit of measure, here is the interesting part. You compare the unit with the quantity. Now, that might sound like more complex than it needs to be, but when you really think about it, it's like, if I'm measuring distance, and let's say I'm using a meter stick, and I walk from here to the end of the room, and I use the meter stick, I can then compare the length of the room to the length of the meter stick. Now, how you choose to do that is the part that's a little bit interesting. So I'm wondering, John, we've been putting people through this sort of interesting exploration throughout all 9 episodes. So what I want to do here is I want to keep that train going here. And I've already given you a little bit of insight into this whole idea of like, which is bigger, like what attribute do we need to know? And then also thinking about now this unit of measure, like what unit should we use? What I want to do is I want to give you these 2 rectangles. Okay. I've got a blue rectangle on the left. Some of you might even say it's a square. Well, it might be a square. I don't know. But keep in mind, if it is a square, it's still a rectangle. So I'm safe saying that. I'm going to tell you they are both rectangles. And what I want you to do, if I was to ask, I want you to think about the youngest learners. I want you to think about how would our youngest learners go about comparing which one is bigger. Now, I want to take a couple things off the table. We could leave it open, and they might say, well, the blue is bigger because it's taller. Or some might say that the green is bigger because it's longer. Typically, though, young children, typically tallness to them feels bigger in many cases. And you'll notice that especially when you're looking at 2 glasses. Like if it's a tall and skinny glass versus a short and wide glass, they'll go for the tall glass thinking there's more in it. That's like this idea, this conservation of volume, of capacity. It's part of their developmental phase. But here, what I specifically would like you to think about is how would they determine which one covers the most area? And with young children, of course, you're going to have to really reiterate what we mean by area, right? Like which one's going to cover more of the table, which one's going to cover more of the screen. We have to be very explicit about that so that they have this understanding and we develop this language around area. So I want to open the floor to friends, and I want them to think about, like, how might a student go about this if I only give them these two shapes? And I'm even going to take it a little further. Let's pretend we're face to face and I physically gave it to them, and I grabbed a piece, you know, like I gave them the one rectangle and the square, and like they had them side by side. Like, what would they do to try to make some sort of statement about which one covers the most area?
Right. So I'd like to see some of that in the chat, but also on your turn your mics on or
mics
raise your
would be
hand.
fantastic.
I don't know if you know this, Cal. I know that you're presenting. We can't see you, so I don't know if you want to do a switch back.
You know what? That's probably like I was probably doing a favor for everybody. You know what I mean?
I didn't know if you were like, I heard paper rustling, so I wasn't sure if you were trying to hold something
I was being
up over
so
there.
animated. I was like hands everywhere for nothing, all for naught.
I know. Now you're there. Okay. So awesome stuff. Yeah. Anybody want to be brave here? Turn on your mic, throw your hand up, and
hi there.
And we can hear like what you think our youngest learners would do to kind of tackle this task.
They might try to superimpose them, try to put them on top of each other and see, like, is there a difference?
Yeah, like almost like layer on top.
Yes.
And like see and like, and then if it was like paper, let's say, if I had these two papers, if this was a live workshop, I'd actually give them to you and like let you manipulate them. Like what might they do with like the two, like they would layer probably. Anything else anyone can think of? What might they do?
Yeah. Anybody else?
They could cut them. Like if they had the two pieces, they could cut the extra width off the green one and see if it can fit onto the top of the blue.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah, like
Snap
folding.
cubes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
snap cubes. Good, like I think who's that? Marcus.
Love it. If I gave them some snap cubes. Now here in this particular case, while we're going to talk about that, Marcus, we are going to talk about snap cubes as well. In this particular case, I probably should have been more clear. Like I would intentionally ensure there was nothing that they could use yet. And I would just be curious to see what they would do, but we will get there because we're going to move to that phase very shortly. But basically
like
what we're kind of referencing right now is this phase of measurement where it's almost feels natural, where you would directly compare them. Okay. So think about this for a second. Like John was talking about the sticky notes and how, you know, we typically go to like centimeters and meters. It's like hard to directly compare those, especially as like the number, the quantity of the units, you know, the number of them gets larger and larger. But if we're in this case and they only have the two objects, like they're forced to like cut it, rearrange it, or maybe like place them over top and fold them. Here, if we chopped it and moved it around, like it becomes very obvious to the student that the blue shape is bigger, right? And the green shape is smaller. Now, something interesting is that we can't even make the assumption they might actually mix those two up, right? They might like forget like, oh, wait a second, this means green is bigger. Oh, wait, green is smaller. And, you know, there's a process there, takes a little while for them. So very, very cool, very interesting. Now, the next phase, and this kind of brings in what Marcus is saying. And when he says that bringing in linking cubes, we call this more of like a direct or an indirect, I should say, comparison, where you use some other object to compare an attribute. Now, oftentimes some might argue it's like a single object that you use, but I'm going to go ahead and like, you know, say it was snapping cubes or square tiles. And this student might go ahead and like cover it. And then they might go ahead and cover this one. And then, you know, what was fascinating, I've done this activity in a kindergarten class. And in a kindergarten class, what a student did was exactly this. They covered the one, they covered the other. They started actually counting the cubes, but they couldn't count that high. So what they started doing, the students started lining them up and then line them up next to each other and went, yep, the top row, oh, the blue must be bigger. Look, it's got more. He just said there's more of them. He didn't actually count them. He just compared the number of them without actually quantifying it. So that's pretty cool. And then finally, you know, you could add some actual counting to it. You don't actually have to go ahead and you know, fully cover both. They might just say, oh, there's 36 on this one, there's 32 on this one. And then we go and say, well, that must mean that we have more on the blue square than the other. But John, what you were saying, which I think is so important, it's the last phase. Like this is where we tend to rush to, both in elementary and in secondary, we tend to rush to indirect measure. And what I mean by this is like, we go ahead and we like slap an abstract quantity, a number of units. And a lot of students are looking at that going like, what the heck is that? I have no idea what that actually is. And I'm sure you see that in your class, right, John?
Yeah, for sure. And that this brings up another big point that about what I like to talk about when what I actually learned using that, say, sticky note problem with my students. And I think it has to do, it kind of reinforces, Kyle, that teachers rush to putting, you know, the dimensions on and then using the dimensions the way they would think. And this is not, say, this point that I'm going to make here is not specifically a point about, say, measurement right now, but more like in general about solutions, or kind of like when we ask kids to solve problems, like for example, I for a long time would teach a certain way, and we've talked about here in all of these sessions before. Like I would start my high school class off the much like many of you remember high school math class, I'm sure, is that the teachers say, today we're going to learn about area of rectangles, and this is how you solve this problem. Okay, well, there's an area, there's this problem where there's this space, and we have to figure out how many of these fit in there. And I would say, okay, let me show you how to do that. I would slap, like you're saying, slap the dimensions on there, calculate the areas, and then say, I want to see how many of those fit in there. Well, I'm just going to divide the two areas. And I would just tell kids that's how you solve this problem. However, when I switched lessons and, you know, lesson styles to what I'm doing now and saying, here's the problem, here's that sticky note problem. Actually, I'm going to share the screen because I got some pictures of student work here. Yeah. Let me get my switcher here. Let's switch. Boom, right here. I don't know if you want to pin me here. I'm going to remove there.
I'll pin you.
You pin me, okay. So for example, in that problem, we're looking at this, filling this board and covering that board with sticky notes. And the point I would have done, if this was me, you know, 10 years ago, I would have given these dimensions, and then said, let me show you how to solve this problem. And I would said, did the areas of both, and then I would have divided them. However, when I asked my students to solve this problem, what I never considered was another approach. And I think that's such an important aspect here is that I was, if a student didn't understand my solution of dividing the two areas, then they would think their solution, which I'm going to show you next, would have been wrong. And I think we do that too much, that a teacher will model a solution, and kids who are thinking about the problem differently, but still coming up with the right answers or thinking about how it does make sense, they're seeing their solutions as incorrect, or they're thinking as incorrect. And so, for example, like here's that solution that I would have modeled from a student. So I got to see this from a student when I said, hey, go ahead and solve this problem. There's a student that solved it the way I would have solved it. And there's the two areas multiplied together, and there's the division of the two areas. That says how many of these fit in there. 609 sticky notes is the number of sticky notes I used to make the picture. Now, here is the other solution that I never anticipated as a teacher, because I only assumed there was only that one way to solve these problems. This student didn't look at the dimensions in terms of inches or these standard measurements. They said, you know what, how many sticky notes go across and how many sticky notes go down, Mr. I'd love to know that. And I figured that out. And so this student figured out that there are 29 sticky notes across and 21 sticky notes down by dividing the lengths up into number of sticky notes, and found the same number of sticky notes. And that's such, for me, that was mind blowing at the
Yeah.
time. This was a number of years ago, only because it was like there's a lot of power in allowing kids to generate their own strategies and then sharing that with the group. Because the student, as I said, to kind of hit home on this point, the student who did this solution right here, if they only saw my solution, they would have thought their thinking was wrong.
Right.
And I feel like that's a big moment for us to think about, especially in high school, because high school, we're always concerned about like, do it the teacher way, instead of the way that does make sense for your level of thinking at that time. So that kind of goes back to kind of thinking about your kind of posing questions, Kyle, about kind of using the dimensions in different ways.
Absolutely. And, you know, the point too, John, hopefully before I mention it, make sure you take the link and toss it in the chat for everybody, and we'll add it to the resources. But, you know, it's interesting because now that you see that students thinking, isn't it so much more intuitive to do it that way? Mm-hmm. Like you're asking for how many sticky notes. It's like, why go to all kinds of square centimeters and then have to like work backwards from this big number of square centimeters and then divide by
it's such an abstract
area. Yeah. Like it works. And it's the way that, you know, the textbook told us to do it. But in reality, it's like in real life, I would have measured it in sticky notes, you know, like and that's probably how
you would have covered it, right? You would have said, if I have to know how many of these fit in there, then I would have just started covering it. That's what you would naturally have done. And you're right. Like it seems so abstract to go, let me actually break the number of this area down into the number of little centimeters squares, or I think we were using inches, right? So it's like, basically when you find there's 1,829 square inches, you're looking at like, there's actually a whole 1,000, like that many square inches. You've like broken it into littler squares.
Yeah, it's like you broke it into these tiny
squares.
Stickies, right?
Right. Or these bigger rectangles.
Ones. You know, and these are things that like as a student, I totally was oblivious to. And even as an educator, I didn't think of it that way. But, you know, the interesting part about measurement and the reason I'm so geeked about today and next week is this is a small snippet. Like what we're exploring today is a small snippet of our proportional relationship course that we have. It's a 12-week course. And, you know, I love talking about it. It's like one of my most favorite things is proportional relationships and proportional reasoning, and measurement is such an important aspect of that thinking. So I love being able to talk about it. So we looked at a scenario where, you know, students who are early in this like measurement journey, they're going to like physically compare the two things that they want to measure or compare. And then they're going to move to this indirect comparison. They like bring out, we'll call it a unit, right? We'll bring in this like unit of measure, and we're going to use that thing to help sort of figure out what's what. And very quickly, they start to iterate this unit. So they start like directly measuring it. It could have been sticky notes. It could have been, you know, squares that you cut out from a piece of paper. Like if it's area, it could be whatever you want. If it's length, it could be pencils. So if you're a primary teacher or studying to be a primary teacher, you'll notice that there's a lot of what we call non-standard measurement going on. And that's because early in this progression, when we get to this indirect comparison, moving towards direct measurement, we want students like picking the unit of measure themselves and really connecting with it so that they can do this iterating, like this repeatedly covering, like that student with the square tiles who just put tiles over top, iterated it, and then counted it up to figure out which one was bigger. And then and only then does it make sense to kind of work our way down the line here to using direct measurements, where we go and we measure with, say, a standard unit, or even measure with non-standard units, but just give these numbers and have students do something with it, right? Like the area formula is like this magical thing that happens, and then out pops the area. And it's really easy for students to lose sight and lose track of how it works or why it works. And they just sort of trust it and they almost over proceduralize it. So this to me is so important, super key. And John, what do you say? Like, now that we've given them kind of a taste of this progression, this continuum of measurement understanding, what do you say we get people tackling a problem here where they
let's
can
get into
maybe
a problem.
put some of their thinking together? And I should also mention too, you know, with measurement, students tend to struggle with it. And one of the reasons why is because there's so much wrapped up into it. So there's this idea of like, what am I measuring? What unit am I going to use? You know, how, like, where along this continuum am I? But then also think of everything else that's piled in. Like if I'm measuring area, I'm also bringing in this understanding of number sense and multiplication or multiplicative thinking. If I'm doing volume, it's like, oh, even more multiplication. Like, things get pretty complex pretty quickly. So it's really important that we kind of keep all those things in perspective. So,
all right,
John, get us set here for how we're going to rock and roll. You get to decide. Are we just going to let this, like, I think having people turn their mics on as we go is always a great idea. What do you say?
Yeah, I think we did that last time where in a Notice and Wonder, we had you wonder out loud into your microphone. That's what happens in our class, right? So in our class, we have kids, I've done it both ways, where you have them privately, quietly write on the desk, and then you can have a think, pair, share afterwards. But it also, it sometimes can get a different vibe in your classroom if you have them shout out anything they notice, anything they wonder at that time. And I think, you know, doing a combination of both can be good. So let's this time do a shout out on your notices and wonders. Kyle's going to play you a little clip here, and you're just going to turn your mic on. If you want to use the chat, that's quite fine. And do a notice and wonder as you think of them as they come. We'll kind of keep track as we go.
All right. Awesome stuff. Here we go. I'll play it maybe twice. And again, the audio, not very important if you struggle to hear it. And even if it's a little choppy, no sweat. You should be able to get the gist of it.
The paper, scissors, plush carpet.
I like plush carpet.
A bench.
I don't think that's there anymore.
A lot of tech.
Yeah, lots of tech.
How much green pieces of squares do you need to make a green screen in the background?
Okay, all right. We'll note that one. We'll note all the other ones. Lumens of light is over in the chat. You played it twice already, right, Kyle?
Twice it's been, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Anybody
trying to
else?
jot a few
Notice,
down,
wonder.
Lots of tech. I've got it on a piece of paper here, so no sweat, no worries if.
Wonder if we're covering the wall is a wonder from the chat.
Are the weights on the weight bench actually made of foam? Just curious.
Ooh, yeah. You know what? A lot of people slam me for that. They're like, "Wow, clear." You know, one time the best was a student said, "Clearly not being used by you," and I was like, "Well, thank you very much. You are correct. I haven't been using them very much lately."
Lindsay asked an interesting one here about the outlet on the wall. Is it centered or not centered? And we've also got a wonder here about noticing the camera. Wonder if you're videotaping or self-videotaping here.
Are you?
Why is there no camera on the tripod? From Anne.
Yeah.
There we go. We got some good wonders. Here we go.
Yeah,
just putting it
lots
up.
of stuff. Are you filming, I think, or photography, something like that? Awesome stuff. Lots of good notices and wonders. Awesome. Any others there?
Chris says plenty of surface area.
Plenty.
Empty walls from Melissa. Blank wall from Lindsay.
Awesome. Lots of good ones here. Lots of good ones. Let's, John, help us out here. What do you say? Like any of these that you can help us with? Any of these wonders? I know I didn't get all of them, but if any of those come to mind, anything we might be able to take off this list
Well,
here? Like, get it
I
out of
think
the
if we
way?
think about like numbers, remember we talked about this last week about quantitative wonders versus non-quantitative wonders. Sometimes the non-quantitative wonders you can address right away. Like people are noticing lots of tech. Yeah, Kyle's got a lot of tech right now. He's in that room that I'm sure he is in that room. This is where we do our recording for our courses. We used to actually do them together before COVID in that room, but now we do our own in our own rooms because I'm in my kind of studio-y kind of thing. So there's lots of tech there for sure because we've got to do all of that. A lot of lighting in there.
Plenty of surface
said, are you
area.
filming? There's gonna be some filming happening here. The empty walls. Yeah, there's some empty walls.
I would say this one, like for sure, we can get that right away. Centered outlet. I'm gonna say
it doesn't look like it to me.
No,
I don't know if you've done some measuring there.
It's not it's not even just an optical illusion. That's the first thing I used to notice when I would be in that room too. And even I especially noticed it when I put this pile of paper down and I was getting ready to take this shot. I was looking, I'm like, I didn't line it up. The paper lined up. And then I realized I'm like, it's the plug's not lined up. So took me
That's a good question. If think about that question, folks, right now, like how would you figure that part out? Like how would you know, or how think about students, like how would students think, how do I know, or how do I guess because I'm staring at the picture right now, even though it's not up on the screen, is like, what would I do to figure out if that plug is centered? I don't know if you want to throw that up, Kyle, because I think it's a pretty interesting question right there that somebody posed. And it's almost like you could, if remember that when we do these problems, if you're new, if this is your first time, these problems, Kyle and I, when we do these with our students, we are very directed eventually to going exactly where we want to go. However, when a problem like this pops up where we're like, you know what, that's a pretty good question that has a good understand. It could be a good exploration with measurement itself, but also like averages, but it also could be some like distance, distance between 2 points kind of question when you get into some high school. So there's a lot we could explore there. And it could be like, you know what, I'm going to put a little star there, and we might be coming back to that as a follow-up to this, because I think figuring out not only if it's centered is where we would fix it, like where would it go if we had to fix it, is also a good problem to explore. Yeah, so you could star that. A lot of people end up asking about like how many pieces of paper would that take? Like sometimes the question is like, what is that? Is that Bristol board? Bristol board. And actually, I sometimes, if students mention that, like, is that project board or whatever, not, if someone uses the word Bristol board, I tell them a little story about Bristol board. It's actually a town. Yeah, it's actually a town in the United Kingdom where they actually like created the idea, like the material for Bristol board. So I thought that was kind of cool, like Bristol. Pretty awesome. But anyway, so you can kind of do these little side conversations with students so that, they just feel like, it's something meaningful in their class, right? And that we're not just doing math problems for the sake of doing math problems. So I'm going to kind of build on that question here, and we're going to have everybody kind of look. It's kind of interesting to me too, because I've never done this problem while being essentially like that wall is legit behind me right now, which is now a green screen. So it's kind of like weird that I'm looking at myself on the screen here and I'm standing in front of this wall, which is, I can't see anymore because there's a green screen there. So what I'm going to do is we're going to give you a little bit of time to kind of make an estimate. Like we want you to think about like how many of these sheets, and obviously it's to scale, like you see the wall here. The perspective isn't perfect, as you often notice when you take photos of things in the real world. But I'm wondering, based on what you see, are you able to help us out with figuring out like how many sheets of Bristol board would it take to cover the wall? So like how many should I be going to the store to buy? It's kind of like a modified version of John's R2D2 problem that we saw a little earlier.
So
yeah, let's do it this way, Kyle. Let's do a little change up here. Let's try a waterfall method on our estimate, but let's all do this together, folks. Let's try all right now in the chat. I'm going to say too low. So I'd like you, when I say go, so put it in, but don't hit enter yet. When I say go, I want you to give me a wrong answer. Okay. So the wrong answers only, but wrong answers that are too low. It's got to be too low. So give me but also don't say one. We know it's more than one. Be risky, folks.
Yeah.
But when I say go, don't do it yet. Don't do it yet because we want to do a waterfall method. So when I say now, not yet. When I say that,
when I say
you're
it
soon, you're going to hit enter, and I only want wrong answers, no right answers. And the beautiful part is kids all day can give you wrong answers, and everyone can participate on this. Here we go. Wrong answers only. Go.
Boom.
Look at them all fly in. So we got like, these are all too low from folks, right? 8, 3, 5. Who's like, it's almost like, I always like to play a little game with my students. Like, who's the riskiest too low? We got 10. I think a 20 from Sarah. Even Dell says 30 is too low.
Yeah, like I love that's like a risk taker right there.
Ooh,
it's like, put it all on red. Let's go.
Ooh, that's too low. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's also be wrong, folks. Let's also be wrong here. Wrong answers only when I say go, but it has to be too high. I know 1 million is too high because all your students are going to say that. You know, they're going to say 1 million. Just say a million. We know 1 million is too high. When I say go, wrong answers only, folks. Go. Oh, ooh, good. Like, and then it's like on the opposite side for riskiness, right? It's like, well, how low can I get so that it's still wrong? So 40s, 50s, a lot of 50s and 40s and 30s. We got a 48, 80, and we got 888. Kyle put in 1,000. We got 500 from Naomi. Now our lowest, this is what I like to do with my students. Our highest too high was, I think it was 30. An interesting thing here is our lowest too low right now is 35. That gives us like a window of 5 boards. I wonder if it's almost like I put that up. I wonder if our answer will be within 30 or 35 because our lowest too high and our highest too low kind of like puts us in a gap like that. Now, obviously we got lots of other gaps that we could be looking at, but now here we go. Waterfall again. Only right answers this time, folks. Right answers only. Yeah. I'm actually, one thing I'm wondering right now, Kyle, is how many right answers are going to fall between 30 and 35. I don't know. It's just a thought I have. Are you ready? Right answers only, folks. Go.
Let's see it.
Look at them all. They're all, like, so far, a good chunk of them are between 30 and 35. Oh, we got some 40s, 42s, 45s. Sarah, 42 when in doubt. The answer, wasn't that the answer to life? 30, 20, 25. Bonus for anyone out there. What book was that from? Oh, Sarah's going to know. She's the one that made the joke. There it was. There it is. Marcus got it right too. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. We're all nerds. You're right. Kyle's like, what book?
I know. I was just going to say, I'm like, not only am I not a reader, I'm a listener, but I also don't do the sci-fi thing.
When I was in high school, I was reading books. And when Kyle was in high school, he was playing in a band.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
I was reading music. I was reading music. Okay, so we've got a good range here, a good range. I feel good about it, John. I don't know about you, friends. Good range. Yeah, I feel like you put yourself in a good spot. So I'm ready to like keep this train rolling here. Here's the thing, like if I'm doing this live, I've done this with actual paper cutouts. What I'll then do is I'll then give them a paper cutout of the wall and a paper cutout of the Bristol board to scale. And that, I'm sure you probably now, after seeing what we did earlier today, it's like really to force this idea of like comparing, like doing almost like a direct comparison and working your way towards like getting to this iterating zone and trying to really visualize. So I'd like you to update your estimates. I'm even going to put it right here on the board for you. And I'd like you to update your estimates now. You can just send them through.
Yeah, just send them in
Don't
now.
wait for us. John,
How many now?
Can you just say some there, John, so we can,
Yep.
I'm going to use red to see if
I'm going to wait for a minute before a couple more come in.
Tightening of the estimates.
Someone, I think Michelle was like still 35. She's hanging on.
Still 35. All right. I'm going to put a red on 35.
We got, here they come. 24.
20. Ooh,
there are 3 24s, 2 25, 4 24s, a couple 25s, another couple 25s. Marcus is saying 252.
Marcus is.
Janice is saying 24, another 24 there. 20 from Lindsay, 2430 from Sarah.
Okay, 18, so I've been 18. Jotting these down. Marcus, you're off the page, my friend. Sorry. Gone.
20 from Anne, come in just now.
20, okay.
Yeah.
So kind of like right here, maybe. So a lot in this range. Like, I don't know about you, where all the red is kind of our updated predictions. Like, notice we had like kind of like a bulk right around here, and it's almost like this. In general, that sort of shifted a little bit once we gathered some more information. So again, that withholding of information is really influencing, now that we're slowly introducing a little bit more, it's
like
kind
shifted.
It's like shifting your perspective a little bit. And I think that's all I'm going to give you for a prediction, because what I want to share with you now is I'm actually going to give you a little bit of, I'm going to give you a little bit, which version do I want to use? Here's the version I'm going to use. I'm going to give this version to you, and I'm going to encourage you to try to apply, like, how could you do this if you were a student and you were trying to think of like, how the heck am I going to go about actually solving this without a calculator? So here's what I'm going to give you. I'm going to tell you that the actual, which version is it here? I have a couple versions here, but I want to give this one to you very, very precisely. I'm going to go ahead and give you this one and say that the height and the width of the wall are 2 meters and 29 hundredths of a meter, and 3 meters and 71 hundredths of a meter. Now, one thing I do want to advocate is I'm going to advocate that we're not looking for like 100% precision. So I want you to kind of think of this of like,
it's almost like updating your prediction.
Yeah. It's like continually getting more precise, but we're not going with like 100% certainty here, because also the other thing to consider is like, I'm a human. And when I put these boards up, you can bet I'm going to accidentally either overlap or maybe leave a gap or like there's, mistakes.
That's also a good to point out, Kyle. And I guess since you brought that up right now about overlap here, is like the idea of like, once the answer is revealed, and I will probably run out of time, so I'm going to fit it in right now. But once the answer is revealed of how many of those boards go up, and then you compare that to the math that you did, that you're going to do, or the strategy that you're going to do right now, folks. It brings up that question, like, if the right answer is more than what you've calculated, what does that mean about the placement of the boards? Does it mean you overlapped, or you spaced them out too much? If your number that you calculated, if the number of boards that is the actual answer is less than your number of calculated, does that mean you overlap them too much? It's like, kind of like, it gives you off this like sense of how well Kyle is going to do here. And and the interesting thing about that discussion with your class, because that's a great discussion to have afterwards with your class. And that's really like, I've talked about this before lots of times, but maybe not during any of the series so far, is that discussion is like part F from every word problem you've done in a textbook. I don't know, what part F is. It's like, part A was calculate the area of this. Part B is calculate the area of this. And then it's like, now, like, how many of these fit in here? And then part F's like, discuss any assumptions you've made. And like, you're assuming the boards went up, right? Like, you just had that great discussion, but it was like, how many kids skip over part F because like, well, the maths, I got the right answer, so we don't even have to discuss it. You know, it's a great discussion to have because it's so real, and it puts like context back into mathematics. But Kyle, let's get some strategies out of here. I know that folks are going to be drawing on their papers right now.
Yeah.
They're going to be sharing some strategies in a minute. And I think, Kyle, are we going to do what we like to do and see some of those strategies?
Absolutely.
We need a code then. We need that code up on the screen.
Yeah, I'm going to fire that up right now. I'm just creating ourselves a new session. And I just want, you know, most importantly here, and just like every single week, this is more for people who haven't been with us before. We're really promoting the idea of like, I'm not really interested in just getting an answer or like having a calculator do the work. Like, I'm like, let's look at what would students do if they truly had to try to update their prediction, update their estimates based on this information, not looking for any sort of accuracy. Like, obviously, the more precise, the better, but we don't want to judge them. Like, we have to make sure that students realize that, like, when they give me their work and their thinking, that I look at it and I respect it for what it is and how they went about it. And then we can talk about some strategies. I'm wondering if anyone who's been here 9 for 9, right? We have a lot of people 9 for 9. We had looked at some conceptual strategies for multiplying, and we did dividing. We also did some fraction, percent, decimal work. Like, I'm wondering if there's any models and strategies that we might be able to put into practice here in order to help us. And keep in mind, scribbling on your page, like, try something. And if you get a dead end, totally cool. Like, we want to see that stuff because, again, that's what true mathematical reasoning is all about. It's about going, like, you shouldn't have your plan from start to finish. If you do, then it probably wasn't a worthwhile problem for you, right? Like, we want to make sure that there was some thinking going on. There was some productive struggle. So I'm curious, hopefully you modeling this might be a bit of a productive struggle for you, because if you're like me, I usually used my calculator to do problems like this one right here. And I'm trying to think of like, well, what strategy would I employ here, right?
Yeah. So folks, just to reiterate, if this is your first time or it's been a while since you've joined us, like you haven't been coming week to week, then what we're asking you to do is write or draw or share a strategy, but then your job is to take a picture of that on your device and then head over on that same device to joinkh.com. It's going to ask you for a code. You're going to put in SIP2234. And then from there, you we'll just hit, I think, just the guest login, put your name in, choose a little guy or thing, and then it's just one button. You just says upload, and then you just click that button and then choose the picture, and that gets beamed all the way over to Kyle's computer. He's going to do some selecting and some sequencing with the solutions that are going to come in. That's what we like to do. We don't showcase everybody's solution with our students. We select and sequence based on the conversation we want to steer, right? We want to talk about strategies, talk about, say, efficiencies. We have this kind of narrative already planned in our head of what strategy we want to bring out, but we want to show maybe a progression, or maybe we want to show multiple solutions. And so students can see those multiple solutions, and then they naturally will evaluate which solution they like the best, and then try to mimic that the next time or reproduce that the next time. So that's what we're asking you to do. Come up with some strategies, solutions here, beam them on over to Kyle, and we're going to take them up. So we'll go silent. I think this one might take another minute or so, Kyle, for some to come in.
If you do it without a calculator, it takes a little bit of time. So no
All right.
rush here.
So
we'll give it a little bit of time, and then
yeah. So a couple minutes, we'll come on back, and then we'll look at them.
Perfect.
How we doing, Kyle? We got some strategies coming in over there.
We certainly do. A few are coming in. I didn't want to say anything because I don't want anyone to feel pressure.
All right.
But we definitely have a good chunk coming in here. I'm just looking at each one here and trying to select in sequence. Again, something John and I have referenced a number of times is trying to kind of decide as students are working. It's way harder online, as you can only imagine. And I'm sure many of you know from your experience online, way harder to kind of select in sequence because you're not hearing that conversation and seeing what students are doing unless you're in a breakout room and unless that specific student is sharing their screen or sharing their work. So very challenging, but I think I've got the first one I want to share. And just to give people kind of a little background on that, like you can select in sequence in many different ways. But one of, I would say, John, would you agree, like one of our favorite ways to select in sequence is trying to like select something that is the most, we use the word accessible, which means many things, but it's like when people look at it, it's almost like you're like, oh yeah. And you can almost head nod because you're like seeing what's happening there.
Yeah, I like to do that as well, is start with a solution that everybody in the class can easily understand and easily it was like, yeah, I see where that came from. And students who have done maybe a solution that's a little bit more abstract or maybe a little bit more it could be more streamlined, as like they're the ones going like, yep, I could have done that, but I chose this over here, and they've got a reason. They're saying that in their heads. And the students who could say had struggle or doesn't even think of the abstract solution because you're going to get there. Like that might be your teaching moment to try to connect the two. But the student who you've chosen here is feeling pretty good because they're like, hey, my solution's getting highlighted, and I can contribute to the class discussion.
Fantastic. Well, let's grab the first one here. This one I'm going to toss up. I get kind of jealous of John because he gets to like see it with you folks in real time, whereas I get like to pre-plan. Sometimes I like just being able to sort of see it as it gets shared on the screen. So I have to think on my feet. So John gets kind of a little bit of a nice, practice round here, but I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to have a look at this. And then I'm wondering if anyone is willing to help us. And here it's almost like we're using a bit of a predicting stage here. Like, can anyone try to almost articulate what you think this particular person was doing? And then if that person wants to, they're more than happy to confirm or deny or clarify if there's any misunderstandings.
People are trying to take it all in.
The 2x4, I think what they were doing there is rounding it to a number that they could work, which would be friendlier to work with, right?
I'm wondering where do these numbers come up, do you think?
2.29, no, it's the small, it's the Bristol board, right?
Is it the Bristol board, do you think?
Oh, no, sorry. The meters, they rounded up.
And again, this is one thing, like, so for a student, first of all, again, we mention this a lot and we don't mean to pick on teachers, but what we constantly try to bring to the attention of educators is oftentimes we're pretty harsh on students when it comes to them labeling their work and we always want like pictures, numbers, words, and all these things. But yet I'm looking at this and I bet you if I ask this person, they could take me right through this thing. So I might go back to this student and say, hey, I'm wondering if you could help clarify just so that the reader doesn't have to, go and analyze where that's from, right? So that it's a good learning experience, but we don't want them to think like it's not great thinking, because it totally is. I'm with you on that. I feel like it probably is the entire wall in meters. And then anybody want to take us, or do you want to keep going and sort of help us through here?
Yeah, I Kyle, I think I've pieced together what's happening elsewhere there. But maybe, as I said, you just said, I'm seeing it for the first time right now. So I'm pretty sure I've pieced together, and I think it's pretty nifty what happened there. And so I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in though to try to explain it, and then maybe it's the same thing of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, like I find this over here in particular very fascinating.
I like
the
it.
thinking here, and
That's
this
the
is
part
the
that I was
part for
nifty.
teaching. Yeah, like I feel like this is the where content knowledge for math and your own like expertise of like just experience and seeing how people solve problems and students solve problems, like because here it's not like super obvious, but when you look at it and you try to do some thinking, I go, oh, I think I see what's happening here.
I think I see it's. I don't know if you guys can see my background. I don't know if you can make it bigger, but I think it's a version of what this student did when I was sharing this earlier. Remember this strategy. I'm going to remove Kyle's spotlight just for a sec.
Yep, you're good. You're good.
And you can remember that this is the strategy that I didn't think of, that the student tried to figure out how many went across and how many went down. And this student said, well, if it was 43.5, I think this is the how many down, it was 43.5 centimeter or inches this way. And every one of those, every one of those sticky notes was 1.5 centimeters high, and they figured that there's 29. So basically they've counted 29 going up. And I think that's what's happening. This is what I've tried to piece together on your screen, Kyle, is that they counted instead of, right, like obviously this student used a calculator to figure out 29. Whereas on your screen, let me pin you to the top now, replace spotlight. I think what's happening here is there's the 0.75 and there's the 50 hundredths right there. And then they're saying, you know what, one of those is 0.75 wide and half tall, but then two of them would take up 1.5 centimeters wide, or I think we're talking meters now.
Yep.
And then 1 meter wide. And then it kept going up until they've met how many they needed to go up and how many they needed to go across. That's what that strategy is that my student did, but they used a calculator. This is the non-calculator version.
Yeah, and I love it. It's so, to me, it's so intuitive. And again, I would go back and I would praise this student. And I know we're all educators here, but let's be honest, doing a strategy like this is probably not second nature for many of us. I know for me, because I used to always grab the calculator for anything that wasn't obvious. Like if I didn't already know it, I would grab a calculator, and eventually you get to those places, right? Like you're in grade 12, John, you're probably doing a lot of things with calculators, and the conceptual is a little, it's still visual, but it's a more abstract and
and for discussion. And for me, Kyle, I think I saw this in a grade 9 class, we might be doing that too, or maybe a grade 10 class. And if I saw that, and even if I didn't see a calculator, or if I just said no calculators, I think the conversation I might ask afterwards, after we see this, because obviously this is a fine solution, because they've drawn this array that says 6 by 4 to figure out that they're going to use 24 pieces of paper. However, I think a conversation I might have with that student is to say, hey, look, you figured out how many of those go across this way, like how many 0.75s fit into 4. And like, what's a niftier way to do that? Like, what's a quicker way to do that? Like, how many of these fit in there? What is our operation to answer how many of these fit in here? Because even 9th grade students struggle with understanding that how many of these fit in here or how many of these line up across here is a division type problem. And so that would be a question where I'd be like, okay, well, could we do this quicker? Or we could divide 4 into 0.75 groupings or 0.75 lengths. And how many would that be? Well, so that might be
you bring up a great point about division, because like pretty much every measurement problem, I actually sent a text message to Yvette, a colleague of mine today, because she's super into division, quotative and partitive. As we discussed in an earlier episode, we went in depth and we did it over a couple episodes. The two types of division when we're doing measurement, It's like every measurement problem is a quotative division problem, because you're constantly asking how many of these are in that.
Right.
And that is division, but in particular, it's quotative division. It's so right away, it's like, oh, geez, I didn't realize, like, pretty much any time that I'm trying to figure out how many of a unit are in another, wow, that is a quotative division problem. Like, so there's so much awesomeness here. I love this visual. The next one that I was going to share, I know I'm looking at the time, we're running out. So we won't be able to do all of the consolidation as I had hoped, but this is kind of like an interesting solution, because it's like they went to centimeters, and then it appears like they went with, well, let's see how many of the, like, it's the same idea. This is like your sticky note example, John, except now they've blown up the entire dimension and they've divided it from there. Whereas the other, they worked their way up multiplicatively,
right,
in using kind of like a table. So if I think about that for a second, if I go back to this idea, this is like multiplicatively working up, like almost like a skip counting method. And then we go over here and it's like there's some long division. I would argue there's going to be students in between where they're like, I want to use division, but I'm not really good at that long division thing. We could use kind of like an in-between, where instead of like adding it up like we saw in the last example here, we could be subtracting repeatedly and just counting how many times we subtracted. So it's like it goes in once, it goes in twice, it goes in 3, it goes in 4, instead of jumping to this conclusion here. Because if I don't have that known fact, that could be a challenge. But I could break this down in any way I choose, right? I think this one's what, 57 into 229, is it?
Yeah. Here's a question, Kyle, that maybe are on some people's minds as being, you know, like we're teachers and we're trying to learn, we're understanding the math behind some of this, but when we select and sequence, here's a question on this particular task. How do you see, and like you've seen 2 solutions right now, but if you consider a learning goal, and probably the learning goal that you're addressing here in this problem is, can we solve problems with 2D measurement or areas of rectangles, is when you see these solutions around the room, and you want to select and sequence them, what are the points that you're going to make as a teacher to connect those 2 strategies together, so that the students can then take that and use that in, say, the next time they solve that problem? Like maybe kind of outline that process quickly. I know they only have like 2 minutes to do that, but like what would that look like for you, Kyle, in going, okay, I've seen these 2 solutions, I know what my learning goal is. What do I want my students to take away from seeing both of those?
Yeah, like I know for me, one thing I was going to share just briefly was just this idea of like, you know, what I meant, instead of being able to, let's say, know that there's 4 57s that will fit into 220 or 229, like some students might literally subtract 57 at a time, or maybe a student's like, well, I know 2 of those is 114. So they're like, okay, I got 2. And then they subtract and like, well, here's 5, here's 1, here's 1. Okay, I could fit another one in. Can I fit? Oh, wow, I could fit another 2 in there. Look at that. And I'm left with 1 left over. So I could fit 4 in total. So for me, it would really depend. I was going to head here only because I know that we're dealing with educators in the room. Here's the challenge for you and I, John, which makes selecting and sequencing awfully difficult, is our learning goal is so much more broad than it would be in our classroom, right? Because we know the students in our class, and it's like, I know where we were yesterday, and I'm going to try to nudge us along this journey. So when we're doing PD, I find it can be troubling for educators when they're watching and they're going like, wow, Kyle and John, they hit on like, you know, this, they hit on that, they did all this, they did all that. Well, we as educators and as you know, teachers, we have so much more experience than the students do. So we can kind of more broadly address learning. Like today we called it measurement, right? And we're doing it in an hour and a half. Whereas for our students, you would probably do like a unit of measurement, right? So you would do like, you know, a few weeks on measurement, maybe scattered throughout the year. So for us, it's a lot more broad. In my classroom, though,
Mhm.
I'd have to decide on what that is. So what am I searching? So today, if we kind of go back through our examples that I brought to the forefront, you'll notice that I sort of went more for division type problems to show how important that number sense is to this idea of measurement. That, I mean, heck, we could have just, did the area formula for the wall, the area formula for a thing, and then divided it in a calculator and everybody's good. Like we're done in 2 seconds and we move on to the next problem. But I really wanted to emphasize this idea, this continuum of measurement, and we'll continue exploring it into next week with some interesting shapes. But for a classroom, you'd really want to niche down and decide, like, where am I at specifically? Am I heading towards how students can apply proportional relationships to these types of measurement problems? Am I really trying to focus in on division, quotative division in particular? Or what is that learning goal? So it's a great question, but it is awfully hard when we do a general, like kind of a generic PD session, because we're trying to hit so many different learning goals that are just so unrealistic to do all at once in a classroom.
Good tip there for everyone. And I think it probably wraps us up. The last thing we're going to do, right, Kyle, is kind of like bring it on home here because it's 1 minute to go, even though we're going to pick this up again next week. As we're saying, we're doing part 2 on measurement next week. So come on back next week for sure. Kyle, let's tell them what we wanted to get out of this session. Folks in the chat, let us know if we hit the nail on the head over here on some of the things we set out to do. These are the 3 things we usually set out to do in all of our session. Kyle's going to show the answers while I kind of
we've got to do this. The first one though, John, like I'll mention it and they can start in the chat, letting us know, holding us accountable. The first thing that we were trying to do again is trying to leverage curiosity. You'll notice we use it in a little bit of a different way through our PD session, but trying to draw you in. If you're feeling like you're seeing the use of withholding information and the curiosity path as being something that you're able to more clearly notice and name and be able to apply in your classroom, give us a heck yes in the chat. How are you feeling about that goal, everybody? John, are they saying it? How are they feeling?
Yep, I got some yeses in there for sure. And the other thing that we were looking at is investigating measurement conceptually and to push knowledge forward. Give us a yes in there. And the last one, Kyle, is the one that we always do, which is repairing and strengthening.
Yes, repairing and strengthening that relationship. We truly, truly want you to feel like that math love, grow that math love for yourself so that you can help grow it with your students. If you're feeling like this series is helping you do that, let us know in the chat. And the final thing that we ask for is for a final reflection. So we're going to have you with a big takeaway. What is your big takeaway? Let us know in the chat, and Michel will be picking, a winner to join us in the Academy. Colton, AKA Rebecca, joined us in the Q&A just the other night, actually. And I'm hoping more from this group will be able to join us on that journey in the Academy as well. So get those reflections in the chat, and we're going to turn it over to Michel to start wrapping things up and select our winner for tonight.
Thank you so much, guys. Really great. I love the video at the end when you were building the green screen with your daughter.
Yeah, Talia, she's
I almost
huge
forgot
now.
about that part, Kyle. I almost forgot
so
about
cute,
that part.
So
I
cute.
know. I was going to go get
it.
her and say, like, look at how small you are.
Yeah. Really fun, really fun. And I just wanted to also mention something that I thought about, is that when you were talking about the fact that in order to do measurements, you need to have the proper tools, you need to have the proper units, etc. And you were telling the story about the children when they're very young, that if you show them 2 glass, they will always go for the one that is the tallest. But I think it's because the kids also need the linguistic tools. Like we tell them, oh, look at this basketball player is really big. We mean that he's really tall. Or if you say, look at this whale is really big, but we mean that the whale is really large or heavy. Or this piece of land is really big, but it's really vast, etc., etc. But what I mean is that kids, we teach them that big is actually tall. We don't use always the proper
Yeah.
language. And so when you tell them which one is the biggest, you know, and they tell you that's the one that is the tallest, it's because that's the vocabulary that they use, and they're actually correct. Actually,
Those you just nailed it. It's like the attribute, right? We don't help them with the attribute.
exactly.
And
As
yeah.
parents, we tend to use very simplified linguistic with kids, and they don't know the difference between big, tall, large, heavy, vast, you know, numerous, etc., etc. Anyway, but I'm just going to quickly conclude by sharing my screen for a second, if I can do that.
Sure.
Just to remind everybody that they will receive all the links tomorrow, so they don't have to worry about the links. They will also receive a quick survey. And then also I want to remind everybody that there is one more session to come next week, next Thursday, February 18, and it's the part 2 of the measurements session that we started today. So, and that will be the last session of the season, and then we'll of course plan some more, but we really hope to see you guys next week for that session. So I just want to, you asked me to choose someone, so I'm just going to point. I'm just going to point.
That's
I don't
what we
know who,
do.
so I'm pointing to Alisa Roman. So I don't know if Alisa is still in the class.
Alyssa,
I just
yeah,
pointed
okay.
at someone in the chat room. I don't know if Alisa in the room, but yeah.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Alyssa, congratulations. You have just won a year inside our Make Math Moments Academy, which is where we, you know, house all of our courses. Kind of like we're really putting on a course right now here with these 10 sessions. We've got many other courses. Another one being Fundamentals of Mathematics that Kyle created, similar to this one, inside the Academy. So you got a free year in there to kind of help you learn along the way in the classroom. All you got to do is if you get our emails, awesome, reply to one. Otherwise, head over to that website Kyle has just put in the link, and there's a little blue circle down there in the corner. That's the chat little window. Hit that and say, hey, I'm the Alyssa that won, and then we'll hook you up with a free year.
Awesome.
Awesome, folks. Thanks so much for joining us. As always, we will see you next week. And the 10th episode, as Michelle has just said, 10th and final. And yes.
And you can
was
bring
it was Sarah
champagne.
that said, yeah, I was going to say, Sarah said we should bring some champagne. I'll expect it at my doorstep before we start.
I'm pretty sure that OTF said that they were going to sponsor the event. It'll show up on your doorstep before next session.
Awesome
I wish I had a budget. But as you all know, the province for the moment is not really giving us much budget, so we have to do what we can do with what we have. But
awesome.
Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, John. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everyone.
Have a great week, everyone.
Thursday. Thank you so much.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Take care. See Michelle. See everybody.
Bye.